You know, we're always told that stress is the bad guy, right? The thing we need to avoid at all costs. But what if that's not the whole picture? What if you could stop running from pressure and actually learn to make it work for you? So let me ask you this, and I want you to really think about it. Is all stress really the enemy? I mean, think about that feeling you get right before a big game, or you're about to walk on stage for a presentation. That little jolt of energy? Is that really such a bad thing? And that's exactly what we're diving into today. The idea is to find that sweet spot, that perfect balance. We're going to explore that zone where pressure doesn't crush you. Instead, it actually builds you up, makes you sharper, more focused, and yeah, just better at what you do.
All right, so this brings us to our first big idea, which we're calling the stress sweet spot. And look, this isn't about getting rid of stress completely. It's about finding just the right amount of it to really unlock your best performance.
So here's the fundamental problem, right? It's a balancing act. On one hand, if you have too little stress, you get, well, bored, complacent, your focus is shot, and you start making dumb mistakes. But on the other hand, too much stress, and you're on a one-way trip to burnout. Your performance just completely tanks. Neither of those extremes is any good. That middle ground, that is the sweet spot. It's that perfect level of arousal where your adrenaline is pumping, but in a good way, you know? It sharpens your senses, it drives you forward. This is literally what high-stakes professionals, think surgeons, rescue divers, pilots, train for. They drill their skills over and over and over again so they can hit this optimal zone when everything is on the line.
Okay, so to figure out how to stay in that sweet spot, we first have to understand what's actually happening in our brains when we tip over the edge into anxiety. So let's get into the science of your brain under pressure.
All right, the key player here is something called working memory. The easiest way to think about it is like your brain's temporary whiteboard, or maybe the RAM in your computer. It's the mental space you use to juggle information and make decisions in the moment. It is super powerful, but here's the catch. It's also really, really limited. And I'm sure this has happened to every single one of us. You're in a high-pressure moment, a big presentation, a test, a job interview, and your mind just goes completely blank. You know the answer, but you just can't grab it. So why on earth does that happen? Well, when you get too anxious, your brain basically hijacks that precious working memory. See, instead of focusing outward on the task at hand, your brain turns inward. It starts running all these little worry programs, right? Am I messing this up? What if I fail? Everyone's looking at me. All that internal noise just scribbles all over your mental whiteboard, leaving zero space left for what you're actually supposed to be doing. Okay, so we get the problem now. The question is, what do we do about it? How do we build a foundation that actually lets us stay in that sweet spot? Let's talk about some practical, actionable strategies. It really boils down to 4 essential pillars. First up is preparation. This is all about practicing your core skills so much that they become second nature, totally automatic. That frees up your working memory. Second, there's vigilance training, which is just a fancy way of saying you learn how to keep your focus on the outside world, even with a ton of distractions. Third, physical regulation. This is huge. Practicing simple things like breathing to control your heart rate and keep your logical brain from checking out. And finally, number 4, recertification, which means you're always updating and testing your skills to keep that confidence high. And this is where you can see the huge difference that this level of prep makes. Just compare elite, high vigilance training with, say, the bare minimum industry standard. Instead of just basic awareness, you get advanced scanning techniques. Instead of only learning the theory, you have deeply practiced protocols for when things inevitably go wrong. That right there is the massive gap between knowing what to do and actually being able to do it when the pressure is on. But look, let's be real. Even with the best preparation in the world, sometimes we're still going to tip over the edge. The absolute key is learning to recognize the warning signs early. So, what are those red flags? How do you know you've left the sweet spot and wandered into destructive stress? Okay, here are the big ones to watch for. First, your heart rate just skyrockets, and it feels like you can't get it under control. Then, you find yourself unable to recall simple things, stuff you absolutely know by heart. Any kind of complex task suddenly feels completely impossible. And maybe the biggest clue, that alarm system in your body just feels stuck in the on position, long after the pressure is off. So, what do you do when you spot those red flags? The answer is not just push through it. No way. You need a recovery plan. So let's walk through a quick checklist to get you back on track and into that optimal zone. First things first, a physical reset. Literally, step away from what you're doing, take a few deep breaths and get that heart rate down. Step 2, a quick skill review. Just mentally run through one simple core part of the task. This is all about rebuilding that confidence. Third, check your environment. Is it safe? Is it organized? Get it sorted. And finally, the most important step, consciously shift your focus. Pull your attention away from those internal worries and put it back on the external task.
And listen, this next part is really, really important. These techniques are for managing that in-the-moment pressure. If you find that stress is just constantly derailing you or it's causing real physical problems, that is a clear sign that it's time to talk to a professional. There is absolutely zero shame in getting help to build these skills. This quote just perfectly sums up everything we've been talking about. Mastery is not about achieving some state of perfect calm. I mean, that's not realistic, and it's not even what you want. True mastery is all about building the resilience to perform, especially when the pressure is on.
So I'll leave you with this to think about. Where is your sweet spot? What does that optimal zone of performance actually feel like for you? And more importantly, based on everything we just talked about, what's one small step you can take, starting this week, to find and stay in your own personal sweet spot of stress?